Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are taking a deep dive into the frankly fascinating, high-stakes world of pharmaceutical facility design. Specifically, we're focusing on the architectural design for oral solid dosage, or OSD facilities. You know, when most people look at a manufacturing plant, they literally just see a building, a roof, some walls. But in the pharma world, an OSD plant is so much more than that. It is a highly engineered fortress. Every single architectural choice we're going to talk about is deliberately made to protect the product, ensure health and safety, and defend against microscopic invaders.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our macro to micro journey for today. First, the architecture of safety. Second, mitigating cGMP contamination risks. Third, mapping safe material flow. Fourth, cleanroom anatomy and design. And finally, oral solid dosage equipment.
All right, Section 1, the architecture of safety, building the fortress.
To really understand this fortress, we've got to start with some high-level considerations. In traditional construction, a building is, well, it's just shelter. But in pharma, the physical building is an active defense system. It's basically a giant machine that houses other machines. And the absolute core of this is the cleanroom. By definition, a cleanroom is a room designed, maintained, and controlled to prevent particle and microbiological contamination of drug products. And because oral solid dosage manufacturing involves highly active powders and, let's face it, very dust-generating processes, a cleanroom isn't just a tidy space. You can't just mop the floor and call it a day, right? It's a rigorously assigned, mechanically reproducible environment where literally every cubic inch of air is actively managed.
Moving on to Section 2. Mitigating cGMP contamination risks, the high stakes.
So, why do we need such an intensely managed environment? Well, because the stakes are incredibly high, and the consequences of architectural failures here are catastrophic. That's exactly why current good manufacturing practice, or cGMP, regulations are so unbelievably strict. The guidelines outline exactly what constitutes a significant risk. We're talking about contamination levels exceeding daily exposure limits, or imagine a malfunctioning ventilation system that leads to widespread cross-contamination between totally different batches of medicine. Other massive red flags include the absence of critical air filtration systems, inadequate segregation between manufacturing areas, or the widespread accumulation of residues simply because a room wasn't designed to be easily cleanable. These aren't just minor architectural oopsies. These are absolutely critical risks that directly compromise the safety of the medicine and ultimately the health of the patient.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the number 3520. In an ISO 5 Grade A cleanroom, this is the absolute maximum permitted number of 0.5 micron particles per cubic meter of air while the room is at rest. To put that into perspective for you, a typical cubic meter of everyday indoor air, that can contain tens of millions of these particles. The architectural design literally has to reduce that down to under 4,000. It just really highlights how extremely strict and precise this environment has to be.
Section 3, mapping safe material flow, controlling the borders.
Pharmaceutical manufacturing isn't static. Raw materials, active pharmaceutical ingredients, and personnel are constantly moving around. And that means we have to map out a safe material flow. This is grounded right in the regulatory text. Both the US FDA and EU GMP guidelines explicitly state the flow of components, drug product containers, closures, labeling, in-process materials, and drug products through the building or buildings shall be designed to prevent contamination. So what does this mean? No open floor plans, folks. The movement of absolutely everything must be deliberately orchestrated by the architecture itself.
So how do they actually pull this off? By forcing a really strict, stepped journey. Materials and personnel start out in an unclassified area. To get into the critical manufacturing zones, they have to pass through an airlock or personnel transition area before finally making it into the highly controlled aseptic processing area. Cleanrooms are completely interdependent. Facilities use interlocking doors and positive pressure cascades, meaning when a door opens, clean air rushes out, which physically prevents dirty air from rushing in. These airlocks function as vital security checkpoints, and from a health, safety, and environment perspective, or HSE, this airflow isn't just protecting the product from outside contaminants, it's actively protecting the facility personnel from exposure to highly potent active pharmaceutical ingredients.
The crucial takeaway here is that you absolutely cannot bypass these physical barriers under any circumstances. Even automated machinery has to play by the rules.
For example, the EU GMP guidelines state that a conveyor belt cannot pass through a partition between a high-grade clean area and a lower classification area unless the belt itself is continuously sterilized, like, say, passing through a sterilizing tunnel. The architecture dictates the process, not the other way around.
All right, Section 4, Cleanroom Anatomy and Design, the Physical Defenses.
Let's zoom in a bit closely to the literal nuts and bolts of the facility. The contrast between standard architecture and pharma architecture is super sharp when you look at the little details. Take doors, for example. In regular architecture, sliding doors are fantastic space savers. But in a pharmaceutical cleanroom, sliding doors are highly undesirable. Why? Because the tracks create these uncleanable little recesses where particles and bacteria can just hide out. Instead, guidelines mandate swing doors equipped with self-closers that open out to the high-pressure side. This makes sure the door is naturally kept shut by the room's air pressure, which maintains the integrity of the barrier.
The physical armor of a cleanroom is designed to leave microscopic invaders with absolutely nowhere to hide. Acceptable anatomy requires smooth, hard, easily cleanable surfaces. You actually won't see right angles where the floor meets the wall. Instead, you see seamless, rounded junctions, which is called coving, so cleaning agents can reach every single inch. Corners have to be accessible, completely free of projecting ledges or shelves that could collect dust. Even false ceilings must be perfectly sealed so no contamination from the utility void space above drops down into the sterile area. And pumping air into this room? H14 HEPA filters. These boast a 99.995% efficiency rate at catching particles as tiny as 0.3 microns. Every single dry architectural feature we're looking at directly mitigates the cGMP risks we talked about earlier.
But here's the thing. The architecture isn't just static walls and floors. It's also the dynamic movement of the air itself. The engineering guidelines specify a really precise air velocity, typically 0.45 meters per second, to maintain unidirectional airflow. This physically sweeps particles away from critical zones. For a Class B cleanroom, the system is designed to completely replace all the air in the room 65 to 70 times every single hour. That's more than once a minute. The air itself is quite literally engineered as a dynamic, moving barrier.
Finally, Section 5, Oral Solid Dosage Equipment, the Inner Sanctum.
Okay, so we've built a fortress, we've controlled the borders, and we've armored the rooms. Now we enter the inner sanctum, the specific machinery used to manufacture oral solid dosage forms. The stringent architectural rules we just learned about, they don't stop at the walls. They apply directly to the equipment too. The guidelines explicitly state that horizontal surfaces or ledges that accumulate particles have to be avoided on the machinery. Because OSD powder processes are inherently super dusty, a ledge on a piece of processing equipment is just as hazardous as a ledge on a wall. The equipment has to be designed for absolute ease of sterilization and simple aseptic setup.
And this brilliantly illustrates that point. Looking at the data on equipment lifecycle standards, we see a really rigid uniformity. Key process equipment like fluid bed equipment, tablet coaters, rapid mixer granulators, and tablet compression machines, they all share identical standards. The product contact material of construction is SS316. That's a highly durable, very corrosion-resistant stainless steel. Furthermore, the expected equipment life is strictly benchmarked at 15 years. You don't just run these machines until they break down. You adhere to a fiercely managed life cycle to guarantee consistent product quality and safety.
Actually, scratch that. It's not just about metal fatigue or physical wear and tear anymore. Modern facility design requires a much broader view. The engineering guidelines flag that replacement is heavily triggered when software lifecycle support nears its end, or when the electronic hardware approaches obsolescence and just can't comply with current GMP standards. In a modern OSD plant, digital decay is treated with the exact same severity as physical rust.
Which brings us to the end of our blueprint. Next time you walk through a standard office building, or even just your own home, take a look around. Ask yourself, how many unseen microscopic risks are hiding in the sharp corners, the dusty ledges, the sliding doors, and the unmanaged airflow? It really challenges you to appreciate the invisible, life-saving complexities of true pharmaceutical architecture. Every seamless floor, every perfectly pressured airlock, and every single piece of stainless steel equipment is working in total harmony to keep patients safe. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the design of the world around you.